Hello, Internet. Long time no chat. I am back with another long-winded Hollywood-adjacent presentation to commemorate my shiny new job in the entertainment industry. So we'll be talking a bit about the history of toxic masculinity within the entertainment industry and how it affects the films and media that we all consume today. So I do have notes, as per usual. I could never in a million years memorize all of this, and I have a lot to say. So if I'm looking down at this. Yeah. So Hollywood seems caught in a paradox. The industry is aware that capitalizing on people's deepest insecurities is morally bankrupt, but filmmakers and executives continue to exploit audiences' willingness to view content that allows them to project their insecurities onto the fictional characters being consumed on screens. This tendency reveals the industry's foundational misogyny. Entertainment is built on a tradition of objectifying women, and this issue is still evident following the Me Too movement. Actresses came out with stories about how manipulating their bodies for the pleasure of entertainment executives and male audiences was the only way that they could stay in the business. Countless women in Hollywood experienced brutal objectification off the screen, so when it came to becoming objects in movies, the expectation was too normalized in their real lives for actresses to question doing it in their fake lives as characters. Despite the bounds of improvement that the entertainment industry has made in fighting misogyny in the wake of the Me Too movement, Hollywood still has a lot of work left to do until they are truly pushing narratives that are inclusive and empowering for all women, rather than women who exclusively conform to conventional standards of beauty and femininity. Toxic masculinity pervades our culture without a solution in sight, partially because of complicated nuances that come with trying to define the term toxic masculinity itself, especially when one takes society's gradual deconstruction of the gender binary into account. Zeroing in on the root causes of both toxic masculinity and what it means to be masculine in the first place seems like an impossible task. An article in The Atlantic written by Michael Salter attempts to parse through these intersections between gender identity and misogyny. He begins his analysis with a mainstream definition of toxic masculinity, which entails the idea that extreme forms of certain traditional masculine traits are linked to aggression, misogyny, and negative health outcomes. In other words, toxic masculinity stems from a mix of evolved and learned traits within the traditionally male-gendered population. The idea that toxic masculinity partially arises from inherently male traits seems to be the source of most divisions surrounding this issue. Many conservative commentators argue that by dismantling toxic masculinity, people are trying to abolish the concept of gender altogether. Salter instead tries pushing the idea that toxic masculinity, though gendered in its terminology, is a result of shifts occurring within all gender identities. In other words, toxic masculinity is not solely perpetuated by men, or meant for men alone to solve. This term itself originated in the 1980s amidst male-centric movements designed to push back against feminism. Originally known as deep masculine, a protective warrior masculinity, the idea became coined as toxic following its more move into mainstream gender discourses. Complicating the issue is the fact that toxic masculinity is more than a societal trend. It is, first and foremost, a damaging psychological mindset that influences everyone to some extent, no matter one's gender identity. The American Psychological Association blames this aspect of toxic masculinity on the socialization of male characteristics onsetting at an early age. Toxic masculinity, like numerous other psychological traits, is learned and perfected during an individual's most vulnerable period of growth, their preteen years. Dismantling toxic masculinity thus requires partially unlearning a trait deeply ingrained in half of the population. When framing the issue in this way, it is suddenly no wonder why attempting to reform the normalization of toxic masculinity is so controversial in the eyes of so many. Stormy, what are you doing? I'm making a video. I am. Yeah. I love you. Okay, hi, I'm back. It started raining and my camera died. I thought I could wait out the rain, and then I looked at the forecast and it's literally going to rain for the rest of today. So if you hear rain in the background, that is why. I can't do anything about it. Anyways, where were we in the wide world of misogyny? Since America was arguably built on the foundations of toxic masculinity, diving into all of the ways that this idea pervades into our daily life is way too much for a single YouTube video. Focusing exclusively on Hollywood and the entertainment industry's influence on societal views towards toxic masculinity should reveal a microcosm of the most popular thoughts surrounding the idea, and subsequently may help to uncover methods for unlearning misogyny and embracing healthy representations of men and women. A study by University of Arizona graduate student Lindsay Roberts identified the main two indicators of toxic masculinity within entertainment: aggression and an avoidance of the femininity. She defines aggression as any type of expression of anger. Then she explains that the avoidance of femininity manifests itself as mocking femininity, a suppression of vulnerable emotions, and an intolerance of homosexuality. Interestingly, these two factors have led to harm on the female psyche in the form of increased scrutiny on female bodies, mental health, and gatekeeping on the types of roles that women are expected to have and allowed to have in popular media. Journalist Anna North proposes that the generational effects of female body image insecurity stem from toxic masculinity. North writes that today, the sheer number of images young people have to deal with every day has multiplied 1,000-fold, and those images are often manipulated with Photoshop or filters that creates a homogeneous appearance that's unattainable for many people. Homogeneity is a common theme in how toxic masculinity projects itself onto women. The mindset idolizes a specific look that all men expect women to embody, even though such uniformity is genetically impossible. These expectations for uniformity expand into the social role that misogynists expect each female body type to fulfill. For example, fat people are often typecast into a fat best friend trope, both in entertainment and in real life. In Hollywood specifically, these issues are usually perpetuated by predatory men. Male writers, directors, and executives utilize Lindsay Roberts' double identities of aggression and feminine avoidance in their daily work at the expense of females working in Hollywood and female audiences. As a result, Hollywood has commodified beauty and sex by dictating style trends, which leaves the average female consumer feeling pressured to buy their way into having a body that is socially acceptable in the eyes of a toxically masculine society. In her article for The Cut, Rhonda Gerlich writes that the gaze that the moguls train on women in private is also the gaze with which they frame them for our own public consumption. Male aggression and anti-femininity have birthed an inexplicable need for women to always portray a hyper-feminine image, perhaps for the sake of keeping men secure in their fictional gendered hierarchy, where anything that seems even subtly feminine is automatically deemed inferior to masculinity. One might assume that the initial fallout from the Me Too movement would have been sufficient enough to deconstruct the imagined gendered hierarchy's role within Hollywood. However, Amanda Hess, in an article for The Slate, pointed out that men are not solely to blame for perpetuating toxic masculinity. Hess interviewed producer Gavin Pallone, who said that during the course of my 18-year producing career, I've been told by a female executive that her female boss would never cast anyone who wasn't really, really thin. Her interviews found that in the wake of Me Too, Vocal scrutiny about women's bodies have become louder from female producers, while most male executives now realize that echoing those sexist sentiments would result in immediate blacklisting. As a result, audiences are now witnessing the extent to which toxic masculinity has warped women's views towards each other. Women used to only silently comply with the expectations being set forward by men, but for better or for worse, the Me Too movement has left them feeling more empowered to vocalize and embrace their own toxically masculine ideals. This is why toxic masculinity has become such a potent, divisive force in America and its entertainment. It is inadvertently embraced by everyone, no matter your gender identity. Gavin Polone wrote his own piece for The Hollywood Reporter that expands on the ways toxic masculinity became an oddly uniting force in the entertainment business. He emphasizes that audiences should not blame the women they see on screens for perpetuating unattainable beauty standards, because women who appear on screen are not the ones who make the decisions that promote body dissatisfaction in the minds of the viewers. This statement is not entirely black and white, since a subset of female entertainers exist whose fame hinges almost entirely on promoting body dissatisfaction. I'm looking at the Kardashians. It's the Kardashians, I'm sorry. Most media stars are just puppets for networks or studios. Polone goes on to say that men in the entertainment industry are less picky about women's bodies than women are. That's probably because they don't read destructive women's magazines and never played with impossibly shaped Barbie dolls. So, in turn, networks and studios are just puppets for toxic masculinity. This problem is thriving on momentum. Insecurity caused by gendered scripts will only continue as people feel compelled to conform to those scripts. Stopping the systemic pervasiveness of toxic masculinity thus requires a stop to the cycle of consumers and entertainers alike reaching for increasingly unrealistic gendered standards. Of course, the solution is much easier said than done. Dismantling the male gaze requires more than transforming how genders are portrayed in entertainment, since the source of toxic masculinity is ultimately rooted in a learned internal mindset rather than purely external influences. A study performed by Plan International found that this mindset goes as far to reflect itself in the way that cameras interact with women on screens, even in films that were made very recently and define themselves as empowering women. The male gaze is really present as the female lead character is always sexualized, victimized, helpless, and needing a man to rescue her. So, in a post-Me Too Hollywood, much of the toxically masculine undertones that audiences pick up on may not even be there on purpose. Intentions are changing as women are increasingly normalized in media, but the male gaze still lingers. Erasing the male gaze and eliminating toxic masculinity from entertainment altogether is a gargantuan undertaking that would require dismantling generations worth of learned gender roles. For now, the best that Hollywood can do to contribute to long-term change is to remove the male gaze from not only its narratives, but also its camera work and mise-en-scene. Additionally, Hollywood must stop portraying rigid gender structures that teach and reinforce adolescents' beliefs about how their gender should behave and act. By committing to this, the entertainment industry would be making active contributions to denormalizing gendered norms. Over time, an infrequent portrayal of strict gender binaries in popular media could eventually contribute to an end in the evolutionary phenomena of aggression and avoidance of femininity, and subsequently, the elimination of toxic masculinity altogether. So overall, Hollywood alone is not responsible for the generational perpetuation of toxic masculinity. But there are steps that the industry must take to help stop this cycle altogether. The industry has already taken an important turn in the right direction by somewhat acknowledging how decades worth of misogyny culminated in the Me Too movement. But filmmakers and executives seem to have fallen into a new rut as they ask themselves, what now? Audiences need healthy, accessible portrayals of characters who possess a strong sense of self, not just a strong sense of binary gender as perpetuated by toxic masculinity. So I hope you found this video just as interesting as I did when I was putting it together. Masculinity within Hollywood is a very big issue for me as I've been trying to break into the industry in my own way. So hopefully this leaves the same type of mark on you. I'll try to get better about my whole looking down tendency and maybe step away from scripts altogether as I keep making videos and try to start uploading more frequently. But we'll see. I have never been great in front of a camera, but I've decided it's time to start putting myself out there a bit more in that regard. So I hope you enjoyed. Please like and subscribe if you did, and hopefully more content will be coming your way soon. Bye for now.